Hello and welcome again to the Rider Review. This is Eric here at Rider, and this week we're going to be taking a look at the 1993 crime drama gangster movie Carlito's Way. Now, Carlito's Way is loosely based on a novel adaptation by Edwin Torres, and the script was written by David Coep. It was directed by Brian De Palma, and the running time is 2 hours and 41 minutes long. And the stars of the movie are Al Pacino. This is the second collaboration of Brian De Palma and Al Pacino. The first, of course, was the well-renowned 1983 movie Scarface. The other co-stars include Sean Penn, Penelope Miller, John Leguizamo, James Rebhorn, Paul Mazursky, and Luis Guzman. The story goes a little something like this. Under the careful direction of Brian De Palma and the wonderful script by David Coep, based on the novel by Edwin Torres, Carlito's Way tells the story of a Puerto Rican ex-con named Carlito Brigante, played by Al Pacino, who after being released from jail for 5 years from what was to be a 30-year sentence, thanks mainly to a technicality brought on by his dedicated lawyer friend David Kleinfeld, played by Sean Penn. He is now trying to focus on getting away from his past and starting a new life, seeking redemption, in hopes that he could make honest money by selling cars in Miami. But in order to do that, he has to find some ways to make money. So Kleinfeld suggests that he runs a nightclub that runs properly. Oh, by the way, the setting of the year takes place in the year 1975. Unfortunately, Carlito discovers that Kleinfeld is nothing more than an untrustworthy shyster. So Carlito eventually decides to go back to his old neighborhood, only to be reunited with his old cohorts, including a young up-and-coming criminal by the name of Benny Blanco, who wants to learn the tricks of the trades that Carlito has been noted for many years. Of course, Carlito refuses to help this kid. But however, Blanco just does not seem to want to go away, even no matter how many times Carlito tries to avoid him. Carlito tries to seek out towards his old sweetheart named Gail, played by Penelope Miller, who has ambitions to become a ballet dancer. However, due to financial instabilities, she has to lower herself by moonlighting as a stripper. There are also many memorable scenes as Gail tries to persuade Carlito to get away from the people he's dealing with, for fear that it could put him into probably even more greater harm than being sent to jail for 5 years, maybe even as far worse as, you can say, death can also be a risking factor if Carlito continues to hang out with the people that he's associated with, or better words, the people who he's trying to avoid. And I don't think Gail is the only person who's rooting for Carlito to stop hanging around with these miscreants. We're all rooting for Carlito to escape the clutches. The entire audience does not want to see Carlito make the same mistake that he has made before. Because when you think about it, if he gets into trouble again, 5 years would be like a picnic compared to what other worse fates that could happen if he continues to relive the life of crime. I know he doesn't want it, and we don't want it, but we also want to try to make sure that he doesn't fall into it. Now, did I mention that Kleinfeld was a sneaky little weasel, well, that's an understatement. He's also a coke addict, a conniving thief, and he also is associated with the Italian mafia. So he finds himself in a precarious situation, and now he must depend on Carlito as a way to get him out. Feeling reluctant that he was going to regret this sooner or later, and probably actually feels like a dead man walking, Carlito decides to help this little urchin out because of his gratitude for releasing him out of prison early. Next thing you know, the Italian mafia is after both Carlito and Kleinfeld, and Carlito tries to do everything to escape their clutches, and at the same time trying to make sure that Gail does not get into harm's way. I mean, he wants to do everything he can to protect Gail, who also happens to be pregnant with his child. And from the opening scenes of this crime drama, this kind of like has a bit of a Greek tragedy implemented into the script, which kind of adds more bravado to what the story is intended to be. You know, and it actually, this crime drama seems more realistic than compared to the other ones. Not to say that, you know, Goodfellas was unreal or Casino. I mean, I think these movies were based on true stories. But this one really feels very real, and the characters seem to be well developed. They don't seem to come across as being cartoony. And we find Carlito facing the realities that you can't really escape your past. Sure, you can't change your past. I mean, everything in the past is stamped and is held in your conscious to the day you die. And I think he has learned a brief lesson that there is no escape from his past, and that he has to learn to live with that. Be on the lookout also for a young Viggo Mortensen in a small role as Leyland, who was a once powerful leader of an Hispanic mob, but he is now working as a snitch to the cops and has been confined to a wheelchair. Feeling like he has nothing to live for, he begs Carlito to kill him, but out of reluctance and pity, Carlito decides to just finish him off. Some people may think that the poetic and the power themes of the story is quite sublime, and I couldn't agree more. It's not a mindless gangster movie. In fact, the violence is few and far between, and the action scenes are actually quite stunning. You know, it's not overly violent like movies like Scarface, Casino, Goodfellas, and Gotti. No, this movie definitely is more of a character-driven film. We get to know the characters quite well. We get to sort of understand their body language. We get to actually feel the way they feel. When you see Carlito angry, we get angry. When we see him in fear, we're in fear. That's just how manipulative Pacino's mannerisms and emotions have an impact on the audience. The same also goes for the other characters too. We may not particularly like Kleinfeld very much, but I think that Sean Penn is doing a good job as a character we love to hate. We would love to wring our hands on this little conniving snitch. And we all want to sort of like push this annoying little rat like Benny Blanco out of the way. And we kind of hope that we could try and get Gail and Carlito to live a happy, quiet, serene life, even though the situations that Carlito faces is virtually impossible. And we feel bad about that, because these characters do grow onto us. And this movie actually focuses on how humans degrade themselves and how life on the streets has an impact towards individuals who simply just want to get away from it all, but just everything just seems to materialize back at us. There's also some very tender moments where Carlito tells Gail about a story about what happened to him when he was 13 years old, and that he had to rely on some rather unflattering tactics just so that he could survive. And the theme is, we must throw back what life and society throws at us. Whether it's a slow pitch or a nasty curve, we have to, if something goes wrong, it's okay to throw back. The performances were all remarkable. I know I've mentioned that Al Pacino was just pure gold in his performance in terms of physicality, emotions, and he even looks the part of Carlito Brigante. In fact, I thought he was more convincing and more real and believable as Carlito Brigante as opposed to when he played Tony Montana. Even the accent was not as over the top as in Scarface. Sean Penn, he also seems very unrecognizable through all that frizzy hair and his somewhat nebbish physical appearance. I also thought that John Leguizamo was also quite the scene stealer in the much, I guess he can almost be passed off in sort of a well-needed comic relief. And he also pulled that role off quite well. And he also proves that he's not, just adept in comical roles, and that he can play serious. Penelope Ann Miller, she's like the only bright light in this character in this movie. She comes across quite well as the only positive role model for Carlito in his quest to get away from it all. And I think her drive is what makes Carlito, push himself more further from her and more away from the scum that he's trying to leave behind. One of the weak points was that, I was wondering, where are the Latino performers? I mean, most of the Latino characters in this movie were not Latino. Viggo Mortensen does not come across as being Latino. He doesn't look the part, and he doesn't seem to fit the part. I mean, he does a good job in his very small role, but I think it would have been better if maybe another Latino actor like S.A. Morales or George Lopez to play the part of Leyland. There was actually a very funny scene where the Italian mafia mistook Carlito for being Italian because of his physicality, which actually is kind of funny because, Al Pacino is, Italian American. So that's just the only really minor quip. If I was to give this film a rating, I would give it a 10 out of 10. I hope to hear from you soon. Bye-bye.